So, you finally made it to the mark of the beast. You've been waiting for this, haven't you? I gotta tell you a secret. You already know what the mark of the beast is. You're about to discover. If you listen to the first presentation, you have the answer to what the mark of the beast is. And I'm going to give you another hint. One word will tell you everything you need to know about the mark of the beast, and the seal of God. One word. Worship. Worship is the key. Amen. So keep that in mind, because at the end we're going to come back to worship. This is, I found this online, this is an artist's representation of what this beast that comes out of the sea, what it would look like if it was a literal, actual real-life beast. Now, of course, we know that it's not a real-life beast, it's a symbolic beast, but the features of this beast tell us everything you need to know about what it represents. So we're going to talk about this composite monster called the beast from the sea. And it's very important to us that we understand who this beast is, because if we receive its mark, well, we're in trouble, right? That's what the Bible says. That's what Revelation says. One of the keys to identifying the beast is, of course, the number 666. But you know, it is the number of its name, right? So again, it's just a sign, a symbol that gives us the identity of the beast. 666 is not the number of, is not the sign, the mark of the beast, right? It is the number of its name, and it's given to us so that we can identify who the beast is. Okay, let's go to the questions. How did God attempt to warn the apostolic church of the coming apostasy? Acts 29. For I know this, that after my departure, savage wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. So the Apostle Paul was concerned that after he was no longer alive, there would be wolves in sheep's clothing that will come into the church, teaching erroneous doctrines to deceive many of the believers. And unfortunately, he was correct. This is something that would happen over the centuries again and again. There will be false teachers and false doctrines coming into the church. What does the Bible say will be received by those who reject the teaching in Scripture in the last days? Revelation 14:9 says, Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If anyone worships the beast and his image, and receives his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. So in the last presentation, we discussed what this means a little bit. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever, and they have no rest, or not day or night, who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. You know, it's interesting that it says those who receive the mark have no rest, day or night. So one of the identifying marks of those who have the mark of the beast is that they have no rest. Now, by contrast, what would be a mark of somebody that has the seal of God? If those who have the mark of the beast have no rest, those who have the seal of God have rest, right? So rest can mean peace, of course, but in general, for example, Paul talks in Hebrews, he says, there remains a rest for the people of God, for who has entered his rest, has himself also ceased from his works, as God did from his. So let's keep that in mind, that those who have the seal of God have rest. Rest is this promise of rest is important, because those who have the mark of the beast have no rest. As the crisis approaches, what penalties will eventually be issued upon those who do not receive the mark of the beast? He was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak. What are they going to say? and caused as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. So, what is the reason that the beast would have people killed? Worship. Remember, worship is the issue here. If you do not worship the beast of his image or its image, you will be killed. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads. How many people does he cause to receive the mark? All. And that includes everyone. So this gives us a hint as to what kind of power this beast will have. Now, when it says all, that includes Iran, China, Russia. What about Richmond, Indiana? All, right? The whole world will be under the control and authority of this beast power. What will eventually happen to those who receive the mark of the beast? Well, then I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them the wrath of God is complete. So the 7 last plagues is for those who belong to the beast. Because the mark of the beast says that they belong to the beast. They will receive the wrath of God without mercy. Then I heard a loud voice from the temple saying to the 7 angels, go and pour out the bowls of wrath of God on the earth. Terrible judgment. So the first went out and poured out his bowl upon the earth, and a foul and loathsome sore came upon the man who had the mark of the beast, and those who worship his image. By the way, here's a reference to the Old Testament. Every time you see a reference, we need to point it out, right? What is this a reference to? Where do you see a plague of sores? Egypt, right? The 6th plague of Egypt was a plague of sores. So those who will receive the bowl, this plague, are like the people of Egypt that God judged, punished. What is God's sign? Tall, that stands in opposition to Satan's mark. After these things I saw 4 angels standing at the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on any earth, on the sea, or on any tree. Then I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living God. We just had a whole presentation of the seal. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was granted to harm the earth and the sea, saying, do not harm the earth, the sea, or the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. By the way, the servants of God are sealed on their foreheads. And the ones that receive the mark of the beast receive it on their foreheads and their hands. What does this tell you? Why the difference? Okay, we can probably reason that the forehead has to do with our thoughts, right? Our decision making is happening in our frontal lobe. So that makes sense. Our thoughts are sealed or marked. But you don't need to have the mark of the beast on your forehead. You can have it on your hand. It's either or. Why is that? What does your hand do? It carries out your actions. You have the work of your hands. So what this is telling us is that you don't actually have to reason yourself. You don't have to agree intellectually to receive the mark of the beast. All you have to do is do that which the beast commands. Right? You don't have to agree and say, I have agreed to worship the beast now. You just have to follow the beast. That's it. Now for us, as followers of God, we have to agree. We have to accept Jesus. We have to follow Jesus. We have to make a decision. Such is not the case with those who receive the mark of the beast. For in 6 days the Lord, that is his name, made, as our creator, heaven and earth, his dominion. So the 4th commandment is unique. If you go back to Exodus 20, you look at how it's written. It is unique because it presents a whole thesis. It's the only commandment that does this. It presents a whole argument for why you should keep the fourth commandment. We're told that the Sabbath commandment points to the Creator. That is the reason we should keep that commandment. It's because of the Creator who created. Now, let me ask you something. How many days does God take to create the earth and the heavens? 6 days. How many days of creation are there? 7. Why? He creates one more thing. The Sabbath. Right? The Sabbath is created on the 7th day. He establishes the Sabbath for the 6 other days as a blessing for the creation. Right? So there's like one more step. It's not enough to create. I'm going to create a special time for my creation. So in the last days of Earth history, the question for everyone, for every believer, is going to be, am I willing to worship the Creator God, the one who made the heavens and the earth in 6 days and then rested on the 7th day? Remember the word rest? How those who have the mark have no rest? Well, those who follow God, those who worship God, have rest. In fact, they choose to have rest. Right? Every week they have to choose to rest. Something unique about the fourth commandment is that every other commandment begins, at least the previous one, begin with thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not. And then comes the fourth commandment and says, do. Remember. Keep it holy. Right? The other ones are, don't do this. But you know what? Do this. Remember and sanctify it. So, then God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it because in it he rested from all his work which God had created. You know, Jesus said that the Sabbath was made for man. It was a gift. It was a gift of rest. Sabbath, by the way, I'm not sure if we discussed it. Sabbath means to rest. It literally, the word Shabbat means to rest, to stop, to cease, to work. So when we celebrate and worship the Creator, we are spending this special time that God gave us. By the way, the only holiday instituted by God for all humanity, okay, for everyone, is this 7th day, the day of worship. We read this already. I gave them my Sabbaths to be assigned between them and me. Now, the reason I wanted to bring this up is because oftentimes people will say, hey, Ezekiel was a Jew, he was writing to Jews. You know what? We're not Jews. Right? Now, we already mentioned that the Sabbath was established at creation. But is it true that the Sabbath was for Jews? Are you a Jew?
No.
I don't want to offend anyone. If you're a Jew, this is fine. It's completely fine if you're a Jew. But of course we can say, no, I'm not a Jew. But you know, there's something interesting. The people that wrote the New Testament, the apostles, the disciples, Paul, Peter, James, these people consider themselves Jews. Do you think that when they were writing the New Testament, they thought of themselves as something other than Jews? Now that they've become Christians, they're like, well, we're no longer Jews, now we're Christians. No, of course not. But if you go and read what they have to say about Jews, they consider the new Christians, the Gentiles, right? They were not Jews before, but they consider the Gentiles, now they're also Jews like they are, in the same sense. I'm going to give you proof of that. Here's Paul writing the book of Galatians. Just as Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness, therefore know that only those who are of faith are sons of Abraham. In Romans, Paul says, those who walk in the steps of faith are the children of Abraham. So the disciples, the apostles, they made the argument that only the real Jews had the faith of Jesus, because of Jesus was the Messiah. To be a completed Jew was to believe in Jesus. In fact, it does not matter what your genetic makeup is. What matters is what you believe. When you get to heaven, God isn't going to be, okay, then tell me your ethnicity. Fill out this form. No. God cares about your faith, what you believe. So, to believe in the fourth commandment doesn't make you a Jew. It just makes you a believer. Because the spiritual Israel keeps the commandments. Those who receive the mark of the beast stand in direct contrast to the saints. We're told that the saints are those who keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus. I guarantee you that when John wrote the commandments of God, he meant all the commandments. Not 9 out of them, or the 10, all of them. You know, it is not an accident. It's not an accident that the fourth commandment is the only one that is in question. There is no Christian church out there that I know of, and you can correct me, that says it is okay to murder, to steal, to lie, to cheat, to, covet. As far as I know, nobody's promoting that. Nobody says that's okay. However, when it comes to the fourth commandment, well, that one God didn't really mean. That was optional. That was for the Jews. But we're going to see about that. What 3 things did the dragon or the devil working through pagan Rome bestow upon the papal Rome, its eventual successor? Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his head a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was a leopard. His feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion. The dragon gave his power, his throne, and great authority. Gave him his power, throne, and great. So we have not really spent too much time in the book of Daniel. This is about the book of Revelation. But if you go and look at the beasts of Daniel, each one of the beasts is a political power. In fact, it's a great civilization. Babylon, Persia, Hellenistic Greece, Rome. These are all great human civilizations. And the beast that comes out of the sea has the features of each one of these great civilizations. So what does this tell you about the identity of the beast? That it comes from all that background, right? It has that history. If you're going to say, well, his genetic background is those beasts, those nations, those powers, those great civilizations of history, that's where the beast ultimately comes from. We know that the beast comes from the sea because the sea represents many peoples, right? I think we already mentioned that before. All those peoples of the ancient Near East, all the peoples that are mentioned in the Bible, they lead us to this beast, to the beast that comes out of the sea. So, to whom did pagan Rome give its seat of government? This is Professor LaBianca of the University of Rome. To the succession of the Caesars came the succession of the pontiffs in Rome. When Constantine left Rome, he gave his seat to the pontiff. This is from Stanley's history. The post filled the place of the vacant emperors at Rome, inheriting their power, prestige, and titles from paganism. Constantine left all to the Bishop of Rome. The papacy is but the ghost of the deceased Roman Empire, sitting crowned upon its grave. Pagan Rome gave its authority for papal Rome. We don't have time to get into the history of it, but basically after the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, the only real power left in Rome was the Bishop of Rome. And this is the moment where the Bishop of Rome starts exercising the power of the emperor. There was no more emperor in Rome. In fact, they left. Constantine was not in Rome. He reigned from Milan, and then he moved to Constantinople. So for many centuries at this point, there had been no power in Rome. The only real political power, and of course a religious power as well, was the Pope. How else is the beast power identified? And I saw one of his heads as if he had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world marveled and followed the beast. So, what happened to the beast at the end of the 1260 years? In 1798, French Marshal Louis Alexandre Berthier enter Rome and abolish the Papal States. Now, there's a whole lot of history behind this. There was a brief interim after 1800 where the Pope returned. Not this one died in exile. But at the end of the Napoleonic Wars, the Papal States were restored for a time until the Kingdom of Sardinia-Piedmont conquered the Papal States during the Risorgimento. This is the nationalistic movement of Italy. And 10 years later, the Kingdom of Italy had finally annexed all of the land, all of the property that was once part of the Papal States. By the way, it's interesting that it was not conquered by force. The Pope was forced to abdicate. He didn't officially abdicate. He left the city. Because there wasn't a single Roman citizen, a person from Rome, that wanted the Pope to run the government anymore. So that should have been the end of the Papal States, or the Papal power as a political power. But of course we know that in 1929, Benito Mussolini, he signed a special pact with Pietro Gasparri. He was the Cardinal Secretary of Pope Pius XI. And the Treaty of the Lateran recognized Vatican City as an independent state under the sovereignty of the Holy See. So during this 60 years, 1870 to 1929, roughly 60 years, there was something called the Rome Question. What should Italy, the kingdom, the non-religious kingdom of Italy, do with the papal power? Well, that question, the Roman question, was settled with the signing of the Lateran Treaty. And this is from the San Francisco Chronicle, February 12, 1929. These words are somewhat inspired because it says, this document is the healing of the wound. So, the papal power should have ended, as a political power, it should have ended in 1870, and yet it was resurrected. And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. Now, what are these blasphemous words? What is the blasphemy? Now, blasphemy is to speak against. In general, we say blasphemy is to speak against somebody, right? Now, to speak against can mean many different things if what you're saying isn't in behalf or for that individual, right? You don't actually have to call them names and insult them to be blasphemy. According to the Bible, what is blasphemy? Here are two examples from John 10:33. This is the Pharisees, the Jews, talking about Jesus and saying, for a good work we do not stone you, but for blasphemy, and because you being a man make yourself God. Now, in this case, the Jews did not recognize that Jesus was God. Jesus was correct in the claims that he made about himself. But when a human being, an immortal human being, makes claims of himself that only belong to God, well, that is blasphemy. That is incorrect. This is something that it is taking the prerogative of God and giving them to a man. So here's an example of blasphemy, to say something about a man that can only be said about God. Luke 5:21, and the scribes and the Pharisees began to reason, saying, who is this who speaks blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone? So, we have two examples from the Bible. Any man that pretends to be or claims to stand in the place of God blasphemes. And any man who claims the power to forgive sins also blasphemes. Well, it just so happens that there is a religious and I guess also political power that has these two specific doctrines that they teach. You can see the quotes here from Pope Leo the 13th and Pope Pius X. Now, I will tell you that I could show you 20 slides on this matter. I'm not going to. I think you get the point. You can go and research for yourself the things that the church says has the authority to claim. Here's another quote from Pope Boniface. It's a little older. Basically, he's saying the Pope is of so great dignity and power that he constitutes one and the same tribunal with Christ, so that whatsoever the Pope does seems to proceed from the mouth of God. By the way, if you're wondering how did they arrive at this conclusion that the Pope was the mouth of God, the Pope was the vicar of Christ, that he stood in the place of God, there is one verse in the New Testament where Jesus makes a play on words, talking about a statement that Peter makes. And then Jesus says, on this rock. Peter, his name is Petros, which is rock. So there's a little pun there. It says, on this Petros, I tell you, on this Petros, I will build my church. He was, of course, referring to what Peter had just said. This is the logical conclusion. We can, study later. But if you're looking for a biblical reason, Catholic Church, the Pope says that they have the authority to stand in the place of God. That is the only real verse that they can point to. Now, they also say, well, the church has the authority to do these things. That's it. God gave us the authority, therefore we can just decide that it is so. That is a confessional. Here's a quote from a man called Alfonso de Liguri. Were the Redeemer to descend into a church and sit in the confessional to administer the sacrament of penance, and a priest to sit in a confessional, Jesus will say over to the penitent, ego te absolve. The priest would likewise say over the penitent, ego te absolve, and the penitents of each would be equally absolved. So basically, they're saying the priest has the authority to forgive sins, and Jesus, of course, has the authority to forgive sins. Now, they're not saying here, let's be clear, that they're saying, well, by the name of Jesus Christ, I believe that he will forgive you. They're saying by the authority of the priest, they can forgive sins. What will this power do to God's people? It was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. There's again a global power that can control what people buy and sell. We're going to see that in a moment. The church has persecuted. When I saw this quote, I was like, man, they really know what they've done. It says only a novice in church history will deny that. When the church thinks it good to use physical force, she will use it. So because they stand in the place of God, and of course God can do whatever he wants, although God doesn't behave this way, they say we have the authority to use force, to persecute, to imprison, and do everything else that the Spanish Inquisition did, because we are the Holy Mother Church. This is a picture of, is an artist's representation of John Huss, standing before a tribunal. I forget the name of the cardinal. He was one of the first Protestant reformers to be burned at the stake for his faith. And of course, there will be many, many others. The church may by divine right confiscate the property of heretics, imprison their persons, and condemn them to the flame. We know that they've done this before. There's no greater offense than heresy, therefore it must be rooted out. Remember that when we're talking about the Albigensian Crusade, the Cathars, how the political power, which was the Kingdom of France, and the church came together, and the church says, hey, we have heretics here, we need to come together and deal with this problem. So, it was, you could say, for a good reason, that the political power listened to the church, and they came together to exercise, the authority to eradicate heresy. Now, today, we could apply this to our lives and say, well, there are a lot of wrong things in the world happening, things that violate God's law. But if we were to go to the ballot box and say, we the church, give you authority to get rid of these heretics, well, sooner or later, it's going to come back on us. And we know that from church history. Whenever we go to the government to solve religious, moral problems, sooner or later, the government is going to say, hey, as a matter of fact, I think we'll tell you what your moral problems are. So we need to be careful. From history, we need to learn the lessons. What happens when political power and religious institutions come together, it's not going to be a holy union. It's going to be an unholy union. Here's a picture of Morris being burned at the stake. How long was this persecuting power to continue? And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And he was given authority to continue for 42 months. Now we learned that the 42 months are in 1260 years. And the start of the 1260 years is the year AD 538. If you forgot, the year 538 is the year that the Bishop of Rome was given authority over all other bishops in the world. He was made the first. He was given supremacy over all of the bishops. And that period of 260 years is marked, the end of it is marked by the conquest of the Papal States by the French Republic in 1798. There's a picture of the Pope taken captive. He would never come back to Rome. There was another Pope that came after him, and he also will be taken captive for a while. So it did not go well for the Papal States after that. What does God say the number of the beast's name is? Okay, here we go. Here's the interesting part, right? It says that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. By the way, notice that it says or the mark or the name or the number, right? It's not all three, it's one of those three. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. Okay, so John is being very kind to us. He's telling to tell us, hey, I'm going to give you a hint. That number, 666, it's a number of a man. The key to understanding what the number means is to look for why 6 is related to men. What is the relationship there? What does that mean? Well, we're going to look at that. The letters inscribed into the Pope's mitre are these: Vicarius Filii Dei, which is the Latin for Vicar of the Son of God. The Bishop of Rome, as the head of the church, was given the title Vicar of Christ. Okay, so in his hat, his funny pontifical hat, there's an inscription that says Vicar of the Son of God. And if you were to do this little, I don't know what this is called, gematria, I think it's called, you can add it up. If you use this as Roman numerals, right? If these are Roman numerals, and you were to assign numbers from the Roman numerals, you will come up with the amount, which is 666. Now, let's continue with this train of thought, because I'm going to come back. I'm going to show you something else as well. By the way, we didn't come up with this. This is a very old discovery, if you want to call it that. This goes back centuries to the Reformation. We're going to discuss that as well. 2 Thessalonians 2:3 says, let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first. And the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition. With that, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. By the way, that man is sitting on a throne, a literal throne. So Martin Luther was the first to identify the papacy as such with the Antichrist. At first, he discounted the value of John's Apocalypse, but then he saw it in a revelation of the Church of Rome as the deceiving Antichrist, a view that was to become dogma for all Protestant churches. So, this idea that the Pope, or the papacy was the Antichrist, is very old. It goes back to Wycliffe, all the Protestant reformers, Luther, Calvin, Melanchthon, Tyndale, all of them share this view. Now, if a lot of different reformers in different countries, several different countries, they came up with this conclusion, that tells you that a lot of Christians, right, that did not work together from different periods, they discovered from the reading of the scriptures that the man or the institution that fit the Antichrist best was the papacy. Today, if you were to conduct a poll in different Christian denominations, and you were to ask them, who is the Antichrist? You will not find the same agreement. Now, my question for you is, what change? Did the papacy come up with a encyclical saying, we were wrong, oops, I'm sorry, we were wrong, the Pope that's not, did they change their mind? Did they say, we were wrong to sell indulgences? Sorry about that. No. In fact, they have never changed their views throughout the Reformation. Today, they still have the same views. They've never said, Pope so-and-so was wrong, we were wrong to say this, we were wrong to do this. So, they have not changed, their beliefs have not changed. The ones that have changed are the Protestant churches. They have softened their view, perhaps because it was unpopular, because whatever the reason may be. I just wanted to point out that all of the reformers believe that the papacy was the Antichrist. And today, not all Protestant churches believe the same, but it's not because the Roman Catholic Church has changed in any way. They've never said they were wrong, they've never changed their mind, It's not the church that changed. So the number 666 is the number of a man because it stands in opposition to the number 777. What does the number 7 represent in the Bible? It's the number of completion, of perfection, the number of God, right? I mean, God completed His creation in 7 days. Man was created on the 6th day. So, this number 6, belongs to man because he was created on the 6th day. So, if you have one number short of perfection, which is number 6, what do you think 666 represents biblically? Perfect incompleteness. Perfect imperfection, right? Like you're just this far from perfection. It's just a little off, and then you multiply that 3 times. So, being one short of 7, the number 6 expresses human imperfection without God. We need that extra number. We need 7 to be complete, right? In fact, the word perfect, when Jesus says be perfect, the word means complete. Literally, that's what it actually means. So number 6 is incomplete, human imperfection. Now, I want to show you this because we've talked about how, 666 might be, if you go to and you do the math, maybe it's the Vicar of Christ, right? But obviously, John did not know the Pope. The Roman Catholic Church did not exist at the time. There was no Pope. None of that was available at Pope's time. Excuse me, John's time. So we need to have an explanation for what John would have understood with the knowledge that he had at the time. Right? Remember that it was written first for the people of the first century. So, did you know that Babylonian mathematics was base 60, sexagesimal? So their most basic units are 6 and 60. Now the number 6 was also very significant in Babylonian religion. And what you are seeing here is actually a Babylonian amulet. The little picture here it's actually on the side because I wanted to fit it in the picture. But what you see, the little numbers there, the little, whatever you call this table, it's on that amulet, in the back of the amulet. Let me just mention real quick that if you go to Daniel 3, and Delphine was the one that actually reminded me of this a few weeks ago. If you go to Daniel chapter 3, and you look at the size, the dimensions of Nebuchadnezzar's gold statue, well, it is 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide. And remember, they were supposed to worship this gold statue. Number 6 was a holy number for the Babylonians. It was a special religious number. So this popular amulet is from Babylonian origin. But I'm going to tell you the name in Latin because, of course, it remained for a few centuries. The name in Latin is the Sigilla Solis. You know what that means? The seal of the sun. So this amulet contained a mysterious configuration of numbers in a square, and when you add it all up, you can see there in the picture, it adds up to 666. Now I guarantee you, since the name is in Latin, I guarantee you that John, the people that lived in pagan Hellenistic society, would have been familiar with this type of amulets. So any Christian church member at the time of John in Asia Minor would have recognized those little amulets that add up to 666. It was a common thing back then to see them. Now, what is the connection then to 666? Well, this is a special number for who? The Babylonians, right? Babylonian religion. And you're going to see in the book of Revelation, Babylon has a special place. There's a special symbolism to Babylon that is connected, by the way, not coincidentally, to the beast. So, the Creator God completes His creation in 7 days. He blesses, He sanctifies it. And the Sabbath day is a day that God has set aside for His creation to rest and to worship Him. The beast power, Revelation 13, tries to create a counterfeit system to God's 7 perfection in creation. He wants to institute His own commandments and holidays. This is a verse. Okay, let's go there. What is the mark of the beast? Well, the mark of the beast must be the sign of this beast power, the Roman Catholic Church's authority. They have to demonstrate what authority do they have. By what authority do they do these things, right? This is what Jesus was asked. By what authority do you do these things? Well, what is the sign of their authority over Christendom? The Pope is of so great authority and power that he is able to modify, declare, and interpret even divine laws. Well, that is certainly the case. We read this in the last presentation, Daniel 7:25. He shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High. This is directly from Revelation 13. It's almost word by word. And shall intend to change times and law. Now, it just so happens that there is a law about time. There is a commandment about time. God says, 1/7 of your life, you should specially worship me. You should worship me every day. But there's a special 1/7 of your day, of your life, dedicated for me and you. And this power says, let's change that. We observe instead of Saturday because the Catholic Church transferred the solemnity from Saturday to Sunday. This is from the Converse Catechism of Catholic Doctrine. So this is a more recent quote. This is from 2011 from a very famous cardinal. I believe he's the cardinal of Boston. I forget to look it up. The way we celebrate Sunday, this is talking about how keeping Sunday is a great thing. By the way, there's a whole movement about how we really need a day off. Officially, we need a day off. It will be good for society. It will be good for the environment. Now, I don't disagree with that. That's actually a great idea for us to have a day off. And so he's saying it's a great thing for Christians to celebrate, well, not just Catholics, but all Christians, to celebrate Sunday. It will affect the way we live the remainder of the week. And it is a mark of Christian identity from generation to generation. So, what he says about keeping the Sunday is that it is a mark of being a good Christian, of Christian identity, of being a Christian at all. What is the basic issue involved in the crisis of the close of Earth's history? So we're going to come back to what we said at the beginning. Romans 6:16. Do you not know that to whom you present yourselves slaves to obey, you are that one slaves whom you obey, whether of sin of leading to death or of obedience leading to righteousness. Now, we're not under the law, right? We know that very clearly. We're not under the law, and yet here, Paul in the book of Romans, the same book that says we're not under the law, he says there is obedience that leads to righteousness. How do we understand this? What is the relationship between righteousness and obedience? Friends, if Jesus suffered so to free us from the curse of sin, right? We are under sin. We have no escape. We have no chance of eternal life. Jesus says we cannot change the law. The law is the perfect character of God. Therefore, I will pay the penalty so that you're free to live your life forever. You're free from the penalty of sin. If we have been free from the penalty of sin, how then can we go back to sin? In fact, Paul makes this exact argument. We cannot. It's impossible. It's unthinkable. It is because we've been free, because we're so amazed by what God has done for us, that we cannot even imagine to contemplate sin anymore. There is a type of obedience that leads to righteousness. It's not earning righteousness. It just leads you in the path of righteousness. Because it is a path that Jesus walked. Peter said, and the other disciples answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than men. This is ultimately what it comes down to. Who do we obey? Who do we follow? If we love Jesus, don't we follow His commandments? The deciding factor as to who receives the seal of God or the mark of the beast is worship. Who do you choose to worship? Who do you choose to obey? Remember I asked you, what is worship? Is it singing songs? Is it raising your hands and singing praises to God? That certainly is part of it. That is worship. But does worship end when you leave the church? Does worship end after those 2 hours a week? Or 3 if you're really good? What does worship do for you? How does it change your life? Does it change your life? The people living at the end time will fall into 2 groups. Those who worship the true God and have the seal of God on their foreheads, or those who worship the beast and have the mark of the beast on their right hand or their forehead. It is what you do that makes a difference in the end. When you are following Jesus, you don't do things so that Jesus will like you or love you. You do things because Jesus already loves you. Jesus already died for you. Jesus already freed you from sin. Jesus already made you a saint. That's why you don't sin. That's why you keep the commandments. Because you are already a saint. The angel saying with a loud voice, fear God and give Him glory, for the hour of His judgment has come. Worship Him who made the heaven and earth, the sea and the springs of water. Why Him who made the heavens and the earth? There is a commandment that points us to the Creator God. The commandment mentions that it is because God created us that we should remember the Sabbath day, the day of rest. We enter into rest when we choose to worship God on His day, on the day that He chose. And if we choose to keep our own day or not to keep any day, well, we made the decision not to worship the Creator God. Now, we might worship a God for sure, but the Creator God gave us a day, a time, a holy day, a special appointment for us to be in communion with Him. For sure, we should worship God every day, not just one day. But when God says, there is one special time that I have chosen, that it was so important that I made an extra day of creation just for it. But that is a mark, a sign that we worship the Creator God. Friends, sooner or later we all have to choose. And we don't have to make a decision to worship another God. We don't have to make a decision to worship a beast, to receive the mark. All we have to do is to choose who do we worship. And if we worship God, well, it looks a certain way. There's some consequences to worshiping God. And they're good consequences. And if we worship something else, someone else, or we choose not to worship at all, well, there are consequences too. Are you ready, by the grace of God, to say to God today, I want to worship you in spirit and in truth. I want to worship you the way that you told me to worship you. I want to keep your commandments by the power of your Spirit in the way that you commanded me. Are you willing to make a choice to follow Jesus, even if it costs you a day of the week? Friends, I'm not going to ask you to tell me if you made this decision. What I'm going to do is to ask you to decide in your head now, in your heart, what you want to say to Jesus. You don't have to confess to me, I'm not your priest. But Jesus is speaking to your heart now. And He wants to know what you've decided. He wants to know who you have chosen to worship. Now, it's not an easy decision, but we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. Now, I know some of you are baptized. Praise God. But aren't you glad that you decided to follow Jesus? Raise your hand if you're baptized. Praise God. Do you know people that have not chosen to follow Jesus? Don't you want them to have what you have? Friends, I pray that our meetings have inspired you, that you've learned something about worship and what difference it makes in our lives. Remember, there's only two options: the mark or the seal of God. And it is your choice in the end. Let us pray together. Father in heaven, Lord, you're an amazing God. We're in awe of you. Lord, you're so merciful and gracious. You're so loving that you give us a special time of the week to come and spend time with you. You said that you would bless us and sanctify us in our worship in this day. And Lord, I pray for each person in this room that you would help them in their hearts and their minds to make the decision to obey you in everything that you've asked, Lord. Every commandment, everything that you ask of them, Lord. Help them to make that decision. Give them the power of your Spirit that all of us, we may be able to follow you to heaven. In the name of Jesus Christ.